I have had so many people come to me and say, "How can I use AI in my company? Like, how can I use ChatGPT? How can I use AI in my company?" And I'm like, "That's the wrong question." The question is, what problem do you have that you cannot solve with traditional forms of programming? And then you can use AI.
From 7 CTOs, my name is Etienne De Bruin, and you're in the CTO studio.
Hello, all. Thanks for being with us for another conversation about all things AI.
My name is Rusnak. I'm the CTO of Airspace. We are a time critical freight forwarder up in Carlsbad, California. And we move the most precious things moving on planet Earth, anything time critical. So these are organs for transplant, parts for downed aircraft, downed manufacturing lines, prototype vaccines, clinical trials, all those things.
I am Kathy Keating. I'm a fractional CTO and also a CTO coach. I come in and help fast growing startups really get their product operations into working order so that they can really grow and scale effectively. And I'm here in Colorado.
Hi, thanks for having me. Mourad, CTO of a company called Slush. What we do is SaaS solutions for event marketers. We pride ourselves in offering solutions that help them create amazing events to help them be efficient and do that at scale. Been doing SaaS platforms for many years.
One of the questions on my mind continually is where should the CTO start with the AI conversation? Like, where does it begin and where should they be in the conversation?
I have an opinion on this. I have had so many people come to me and say, "How can I use AI in my company? Like, how can I use ChatGPT? How can I use AI in my company?" And I'm like, "That's the wrong question." The question is, what problem do you have that you cannot solve with traditional forms of programming? And then you can use AI. Because a lot of times, like, you don't just have, data sitting around that's perfect to train a model on. At Airspace, one thing we do is we calculate the perfect route for like that organ or that part for a downed aircraft. And we couldn't just start with AI. We had to first use regular imperative programming, reach out to APIs and build a data set. And then we kind of bumped into this problem where it couldn't get any better. And we would have needed these giant configuration objects that customers never would have filled out to for the system to get the route correct. And instead, we trained a model on how to minimize human interaction with the routes. So it learned how to minimize human changes by looking at a huge data set of human changes. And I think that's like the best place to start off is like, what problem do you have that traditional forms of programming cannot solve?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. 100% agree with you, Ryan. Coming from the perspective of where should I use AI in my business is really common these days. I probably about 50% of the coaching calls I get on, I hear either my investor or my CEO wants me to use AI in the business and I don't know where to start. And so, I always take them back to what are the problems that you're trying to solve that you can't solve today. I think another challenge where that's worth solving with things like AI is when speed is of the essence, when there's a really complex question to answer. So, I talked about how I worked in AI way back when we were actually tasked with determining if a call on a mobile phone is fraudulent. And this is back when mobile phones weren't very secure. And we had 3 seconds to determine if a call was fraudulent and shut it down on the network. And 3 seconds is not a lot of time in those early years of tech. And just think of all the parameters that you had to evaluate to be able to make that decision in less than 3 seconds. Today we would say make that in 3 milliseconds, right? But still, like there's just things that humans can't do in seconds or milliseconds and systems can. And so complex processing is, I think, a huge win for application of AI.
I agree, but I like also to think about it from an additional complementary angle, and that is AI is coming at us and coming at us at increasing speed. So if I use the analogy with mobile, the wrong question that people are asking themselves when mobile started becoming a thing, and that is, how do we get into mobile? How do we provide mobile solutions? The right question turned out to be mobile is changing behaviors, and therefore what we need to be aware of and take into account so that we become relevant and find new value. There's things that we can distinguish ourselves in as a provider, new problems that we need to solve or needs that we need to attend to. I think this is pretty much the same thing with AI. It is changing habits very quickly. So what happens just with ChatGPT, for example, many of our colleagues are using marketing automation with AI embedded in them. Our security solution, our DevSecOps teams using AI without perhaps even them necessarily feeling it. But in terms of an explicit strategy within a company, for example, to drive solutions, I definitely agree. It needs to undertake a deliberate approach in terms of not just pursuing AI for AI's sake, but trying to figure out what kind of business problems we need to solve in light of our business strategy and how AI can be leveraged for that. And then making the case, why AI to begin with? Is it really an AI? Is it a problem that needs AI? And so therefore identifying the problems and also the opportunities, but also understanding the larger context of the behavior changes that things that will be part of the equation.
I think that's brilliant, the behavior change aspect of this, because we are stuck in the way that we behave today, and we actually can't see out of the box that we're in. And then something amazing like a mobile phone or laptops or, whatever, or AI show up, and we adopt them because they make our lives easier. But it isn't until that moment that we see the thing out there in front of us and we see the solution that we actually see our behavior can change. And I think that is some of the challenges that we see when we can't, when we say, oh, it's all about AI and how we're going to bring AI in. It's like, no, this thing is hard over here. This thing I'm doing over here is hard and I need a solution for that. And that might mean I need to think fully out of the box and think about how something like AI could affect that behavior change. But I think it's sometimes we just don't see that until it's right in front of us.
Well, it sounds almost like fear-based if it's from how do I use this versus let me diligently look at what's happening in my org and seeing where the problem is and can this fit inside of it versus, oh my gosh, like I'm going to be left behind if I don't figure out how to use this. So in so far, all of your experiences, where should someone be considering AI?
I can give two examples. One, I'll put it super in context of logistics, which is we were first writing the software and there's a question of how long is it going to take for the driver to get there? What's the industry standard? And we were like, okay, it's 90 minutes, but we're going to say 60 because we're better than everybody else, which was the most startup-y thing ever. And it ended up hurting us on both sides where like, if we were picking up in the middle of nowhere, the logistics manager, we might say, hey, look, it's going to take 2 hours to get there. They'll say, no problem. Then we tell the user, we're going to be there in 60. It's a big problem. Opposite side is we're in a place we have lots of density, just driver density everywhere. We tell them we'll be there in 60 minutes. We're there in 7. And they're like, now I've got to wait. I'm not ready yet. They're going to be here in 60 minutes. So what we did was we used AI, of course. So we started better modeling the drives. So we could look at every driver in the area and build a model on their historical driving behavior. What vehicle are they in? If they're in, a box truck, they're not going to drive the speed limit likely. And if they're in a fast car, of course they will. They also have historical driving preferences. We also can look at their location times, like how efficient are they at these locations? And we built lots of little models, which then trained another model. We passed those as parameters into another model, which is called ensemble learning. And that let us build this really dynamic picture of an area. So we could do better estimations of how long it's going to take to complete a job, which let us choose better flights. It let us give better data to customers. And truly, we could not have done that with imperative programming. So like, that's just a great example of a time when AI can make decisions that humans could make, but it'd be really, really, really hard. And they couldn't do it nearly as fast. And we use that deeply. Another one is just a fun, quick one, which is we had these giant SOPs, 10 pages. And the idea is an order comes in and the operator needs to know this like the back of their hand. And that's a tall ask. So our system lets you take that SOP and rip it apart into these little discrete tasks that can then be fed to our operator at the correct time based on order status. But someone's got to read hundreds and hundreds of these documents and separate them. Well, one day I come in and someone made a huge dent in that work. And I was like, how did you do that? And they go, ChatGPT. And I was like, what? So what they did was they gave an example of a couple SOPs. They did this in one query. So they put a couple SOP snippets in there And then they said, these are the tasks that I would result from it. There's the input. This is what I want the output to be. And then they sent in a new one and they said, what are the tasks for this one? And it did a shockingly good job. So I'm amazed that like the tooling is that good where people can use it ad hoc without permission. You don't have to maintain the model anymore. That would have been a huge endeavor just 6 months ago. And now they're just using it kind of ad hoc. So there's like my production story, and then there's my little fun story on the side.
Yeah. First one, I think, is really taking things that are really hard for the average lay person. So I'm thinking like things that are difficult to understand, like legal documentation. I swear legal is not written in English. Like it's written in some other language that, only lawyers understand. And me as a layperson, I get a contract. I need to understand what that means. And there's a vast number of legal documents out there on which these models are trained. And so a great application is just simply summarizing and telling me in plain English what this legal phrase means. Sometimes AI is the simplest application, has the biggest power for the end user in our systems. Is like, just make this easier for me to really understand. I do know a company that's actually built that directly into their platform and people love it. Another thing I was thinking about, think about all those things where humans make decisions that are highly biased. So I think of our legal system where we have jurors making and judges making legal decisions. And yet there's hundreds of years of precedent around, what type of, so if they're guilty, what type of prison time are we going to give them? And so we know it's all over the board. There's people who were in prison for 10 years who stole $20, and there are other people that embezzle millions that get off. So there's this vast bias in that system because humans are involved in that process. Well, like that's a great opportunity, I think, to help AI live beside the human decision-making process. It doesn't have to replace it. It can live beside and be informing the process and even looking historically to help us create better regulations and guidelines for this kind of work. So that's another area that I was thinking about. How can we live in harmony with AI and let AI support us to make better decisions as humans versus, just our incomplete decisions that we make based off incomplete data or biased information. I just think that there's just so many great stories about how we can leverage AI, and it doesn't have to be go build your own, algorithm. It doesn't have to be this massive project. The other day I was just thinking, what if doctors had a summary of your entire medical records at their fingertips the moment you walked into the doctor's office for that, 10-minute visit that you get? How many of those 10 minutes does a doctor even spend trying to figure out where you are at today? What if they had that all at their fingertips because your medical records were, evaluated? So like that's kind of things I think is like, how can we help everyone do their job better so that we can focus on what matters in our jobs?
I support that. Yeah, me too. To me, basically, it comes down to where we encounter complexity, where we encounter expertise. I think typically there lies the potential of leveraging AI and machine learning to add value. Typically, those things are complicated to code, complicated to solve for. The examples that Kathy and Ryan gave basically fit within this category quite well. And also in my previous world and kind of prop tech, it's a highly regulated world. It's quite complicated in terms of laws and regulations of what needs to do under what circumstances. So trying to model what would be the right course of action to take that minimizes risk, minimizes cost is complex. It's hard to solve algorithmically. But at the same time, what you have is part of our customer base, our users also, who have expertise. And definitely agree with that, with Kathy there. Our goal should not be to replace those for the most part. It should be to enable them, should be to assist them to be able to do more and more effectively and more efficiently. The example given with lots of data in the medical world and be able to process the data effectively to enable decision-making in a cost-effective and time-effective way is an ideal kind of solution. And I think this is where AI and machine learning can be utilized to create significant value And I think there is another aspect of AI here that, besides what may impact our customers, that is what may impact our own operations. I loved, for example, the discussion that occurred just today with 70 CTOs. I invited a guest to talk about how engineers can be made more productive through something like GitHub Copilot, right, as a tool. So that's another take on how AI can be utilized to create value, not necessarily in customer facing, but or indirectly, at least not necessarily customer way, but to be more productive. So it definitely, I think I anticipate that more and more of this to be the case where AI will be in more places or be doing AI in more ways than we can anticipate now.
It was really cool to hear all the major themes. The biggest ones that I heard was decision making, summarizing, and where complexity exists. It's like a good place to start integrating or considering where AI might be supportive to a problem. Are there clear visions or opinions on where not to start with AI?
I have a shtick on this, but I don't know if it's an actual opinion. My shtick on like where you should not use AI is like we started with routing and dispatching and like measurement and deep path deviation because it's a great thing that machines are good at and people can do it, of course. But like what machines still aren't very good at is like talking to someone that's scared on the phone. So someone who just gave an organ or a number of organs to a driver, you're not gonna tell them to interact with your chatbot, you know? Like they need to interact with someone who's gonna tell them it's okay and how to monitor the progress and someone who can actually manage their feelings. I don't know if AI can do that eventually, but right now people do it better. So I would say stay away from the human and emotional sides, and society will probably be a better place for it.
So, no AI therapists.
It's not for a
I'm
while.
sure something's I'm sure somebody's building it. So like it gets to that the situation, Brittany, where people have a solution, AI, and they're seeking a problem. And I think anytime you have a solution and you're seeking a problem, just don't do it. If you have a meaningful problem and the tool fits the need to solve the problem, use the tool. And AI is just another tool. I think that there's a lot of just because you think of it doesn't mean it's a good idea that you should implement on. And, sometimes we shouldn't go after those things. We saw this with blockchain. Ooh, blockchain, really cool technology. Let me go search for a problem to solve with blockchain. And we ended up with all these solutions that actually like are not effective products in the blockchain space. Now there's also a bunch that are amazing in the space as well. So again, use the tool for the need, and if the tool is the right one for the need, solve it. I think we do people in general who are not technologists. I think we do them wrong when we come at technology from this perspective and get all hyped up on this really cool, neat new thing. Because there's a lot of fear in the world. There is a lot of fear of AI. Everyone's seen all the Terminator movies, and in their mind, that's what AI is going to do. It's going to take over the world. And the truth is, like, we are pretty far from that. At least me as a technologist, I think that. Other people might not, that are technologists. But, I think if we do the right thing, care about the people that we're delivering our solutions to, then we'll do the right thing, and AI will be a great tool for us. If we instead want power and money and, control over others, then we're going to end up with AI that is all about power and control and money. And so the question is like, what are we going to do? We're going to do the right thing with this technology and use it responsibly. I think that's really what's important here in this equation is how do we use these tools responsibly is really important.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And to add to that a little bit, depending on the maturity of the kind of AI that we want to pursue or the complexity of the problem, I think a few things that to be kept into account are the risks associated with having an AI solution, risks related to ethics, risks related to privacy. So risks not just for company itself, but also for the end user as well. So if we give them a powerful tool, what risk do we impose on them that they not be aware of? So I think those things are critically important. And we saw it in all the got recent stories about ChatGPT as an example. So the things we as CTOs, as we aspire to kind of leverage AI to do all the great things that we talked about, these become extremely important things for us to take into account so that we deploy solutions knowing that risk is well managed and mitigated. So that we get the value without all the negative impact.
My experience of all the CTOs I coach and so often in the forums, it's like, hey, how do I actually be inside of a role where everyone has urgency about my role, right? Because we all have a relationship with tech that's, oh my gosh, it didn't work. Like, how do we fix this? So it sounds like one of the ways to really ensure that we have efficiency and efficacy with AI is slow down. Like, don't just get so wrapped up in this, oh my gosh, this conversation is urgent, so I need to figure it out. It's more, let me actually see what might be necessary inside of my organization or what's not working. And I think that sounds really cool. It completely puts a different connection to AI and the role of CTO to say, wait, like let's pause and actually connect with this on a different level rather than the sense of urgency.
Absolutely. And a good way to go about that, in addition to slowing down the sense of let's educate ourselves. But at the same time, that can be implemented by prototyping, experimenting, starting slow, identifying humble ways to approach complex problems, not try to bite too big and try to be too overly ambitious. So as we learn, because I think in many companies, AI would be a new practice, even if it is an existing practice, state of the art is advancing so fast. It's a constant effort to keep up. So being humble, start small, and be open to a lot of learnings and experimentation, I think is going to be critical for us to kind of figure out how to deploy AI in an effective way.
I'll also throw out that like I regularly talk people out of using AI. Regularly. I do that way more often than I tell people to use it because like the truth is like building one AI model and sticking it in production is a marriage. And I'm like, are you ready for that commitment? Like, are you ready to manage that data pipeline forever?
So it sounds like we're already starting to talk about strategies to implement or bring in AI or look at how it could integrate with our work. Is there anything else we would say is necessary or would be important to have in terms of an AI strategy?
Well, I think you need to walk before you run. So what I hear often, CTO horror stories of, yeah, I decided to bring AI in. And so I hired a bunch of PhD candidates and locked them in a room. And 6 months later, we still didn't know what we were doing. And then I fired them all and I brought in some simple data scientists to put like real models into practical application. And then that's where they saw their success. So I think this is a typical data science pathway that when data science became the norm, a lot of companies followed and they really regret like going to that theoretical, I'm going to create blue sky, algorithms and models that no one's ever done before. To get there, you have to know the basics. And so like Ryan was saying, just actually putting that model into production, that first one is huge, right? It's a whole different way of putting, code into production. You have data pipelines. Most companies, aren't highly skilled at, managing their data pipelines cleanly and don't have a really good strategy on that. So you have to think about like all the strategies and the processes you need to put in place. Just have good hygiene about having AI in production. And then you scale from there. That's when you say, okay, now I have this problem that there are no algorithms for. I've got to go create one.
And also, it's important to define what will be the success criteria. If we try to launch an AI track, let's say, to support, business strategy in new creative ways and all the things we talked about before, what are the success criteria that we can articulate so we know that we're on track and be able to monitor our progress as we go? And I definitely agree again with the need to go slow, to go in a humble way, not to back too big from the beginning and kind of leave a lot of the learnings to experimentation. And also implement a data-centric culture. I think this is going to be critical. I think it's what Kathy was talking about in relation to how does data figure in the way we operate as an organization? And what are all the other aspects of data strategy, right? Data strategy should be part of an AI strategy. How is our data managed? All the security matters, governance matters, and things like that. Quality matters. The quality of the AI strategy is directly correlated to the quality of the data. So knowing how to manage that data is going to be critical. So understanding where we are, understanding what we want to be, and what we can do between where we are and where we want to be is going to be an important part of it. So yeah, I think just kind of these things I think are going to be critical to take into account.
I agree with everything said. I'll just throw out a quick hack, which in my opinion is if you are committed to hiring like an AI team or an, ML engineer, like sit them with the product team. That's what I do. Don't put them in a corner in some dark room and expect them to spit out gold. Stick them with the product team, have them just drenched in problems all day. And once they start kind of understanding the business, they'll say, I can solve that. And I'm also familiar enough with the data. And I think we've got rich enough data to continually support that and continually solve that problem. So I think that's like my recommended hack for everybody is to make sure that you don't end up in a situation where you have an AI team and code is never going to production.
It's interesting that you see that, Ryan, because in the past I had a machine learning engineer. I know the first few things I had him work on is connect with stakeholders from all sorts of things in the company, marketing, product, sales, solutions, customer support, with one primary goal, and that is to understand our business and to understand the customers. So most of the conversations I've had with him initially were around that and less about technology,
Yeah.
with machine learning algorithms and all that. I think it's very important, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. So having this kind of understanding would be perhaps the best way to start, so that our driver and the success criteria that I talked about are not defined in terms of technology, right? We're happy because we've built this cool machine learning algorithm that performs in this manner and gives prediction with this kind of, confidence levels and so on and so forth. These are important, but these are not success criteria. Success criteria are really defined in terms of value that we deliver to customers, if they are customer facing solutions, or in the form of what kind of gains in terms of productivity or quality or accuracy, if it is something that we institute in our operations.
Yeah. These people are, they know their hammer, right? They know their tooling. It's our job to tell them what to swing it at. And that's not a conversation. That is lots of time, weeks and weeks and weeks of business exposure.
What do you all think are some of the questions or conversations that are most interesting? Like if you got to be put in a room of CTOs and you were like, oh, this question, I can't wait to hear what other people think about this. In terms of AI, what would the conversations you would want to be in with regards to AI?
I have one that is a constant thorn in my side, which is we have over a dozen models in production with the most incredible and talented team building and maintaining. And that's expensive and it's hard. And we, abstract these things, obviously like in our servers, and they are behind HTML and thick client mobile applications. And the utilization of the model, it's not always clear to the end user. So I know that our business completely depends on AI and our users are better. They're better served. They're safer because of it. But our competitors can just say, yeah, we have AI too. And that kills me, right? Is I think the desire for AI creates this, temptation to just lie and say, yeah, we do AI. When really it's just a person. It's a hamster on a wheel. It's a wizard behind a curtain, maybe. And they've got the same biases and problems of everybody else, and they get sick and they have bad days. And there's latency on the connection, and there's all the problems that still exist, which is why AI was invented and utilized. So what you end up with is someone lying, saying they have it, setting user expectations. And then in our world, you actually have negative patient outcomes. So the people that are lying and saying, oh yeah, we have AI too, in my opinion, are actually hurting people, like having major negative health outcomes. And we have a hard time fighting that, because what do? Lay out all of our models on the table and say, look at all these beautiful AI models that we maintain, when they can just put it on their website, say, yeah, we use AI. It's great.
Yeah, I think you don't win. You can't win with, ultimately, you're not going to win with just coming with the technology. There's going to be a point at which, the hype is big right now, but the hype will go away and AI will just become the norm. And the way you win is by telling great stories and amazing case studies. And then along the way in those case studies, highlighting how AI enables that to be more effective. It's like the more you can tell the story, the more trust gets built. And I think that's incredibly important conversation to have. And there are a lot of people out there just checking the box. They put like one NLP model or something into their system and they're like, I got AI.
Oh, at best. Yeah.
Uh,
A badge, maybe we're just kind of wearing a badge.
Yeah. I think they Googled Amazon SageMaker and were like, we do AI.
And also in terms of technology, so much has, since I was doing AI a long time ago, paradigms have shifted tremendously. So if my answer to your question would be, with all the CTOs, I would love to learn what would be existing frameworks, tools that can be leveraged so that I don't find myself having to implement anything that I don't have to. And there are a lot of them out there. It just takes knowing about them, takes researching and be able to network with like-minded CTOs who can share their experience and their expertise would be an excellent way for someone who wants to implement or finds the need to implement AI, for example, in their practice and the solutions, knowing also where to get started and how to deploy that in-house in their process, and also what kind of skills are needed in-house, how to build a team or just the right team, not overly hire or hire too many PhDs, for example, or have just kind of engineers that help leverage the tools that exist today in the best of manners to create the value that we need without necessarily blowing up our costs, without necessarily encountering failures that could have been mitigated should we have made better decisions upfront.
Yeah. I think you guys are talking about two sides of the same coin, in my opinion, which is, what are all the things that AI can do, and then how can I use those? What problems are now like in its strike zone? There was this kind of, there's a history, there's this little piece of airspace that I will probably never, ever forget. And that is there's a big key feature of the application that I was ready to just delete. I was ready to just change that to a form submission, which would go to a human, and then they would make a decision. They would get that back to the user because that part just got so complicated. And we had one guy who had, written some AI models in the past and goes, I can do this with AI. And 3 weeks later, he had a prototype and it worked well enough for us to say, let's double down on this and keep building it. And if he didn't have that exposure on this being a problem that AI was suited to solve, we would have just had a completely different application.
Out. Is there anything else on any of yours minds that's top of mind that you feel hasn't been said that either you've learned from trial and error or you just have an intuition about or you've researched about that you feel people should be thinking about or talking about when it comes to AI? Whether you're the CTO or a software engineer, is there anything else we should all have our eyes on?
My addition to this would be the culture/process aspect, because, given this is a relatively new thing in the history of technology, having a culture of innovation in a company is important to successfully implement AI and machine learning. So thinking about what it means for us to be able to embrace AI as something that we do, as something that we utilize to develop solutions and make a difference in all things that we talked about. So being able to embrace an innovation mindset is critical in a company for all the reasons that we talked about: the experimentation, the learning, potential failures, and all of that. So if we are in an environment that does not tolerate risk taking, that does not tolerate failure, then the chances of successful deploying AI are not very good. On the other hand, making sure that we have that kind of environment so we can embrace all the things that come with adopting new technology and new initiatives, then I think the success factors would be better.
I think one thing I don't hear people talk about a whole lot is the expectations of users shifting because now there's so much publicly facing AI. Like literally 6 months ago, no one touched it. they did it indirectly, right? But like end users weren't jumping into SageMaker, or like spinning up Jupyter notebooks and getting all these expectations. It's the same thing Google did to search. If you implement search in your application, it better be good. It better have a type ahead, it better come back really fast, and it better have really relevant results because everyone has expectations around that. Or in logistics. So, if you ordered pizza from Domino's, it's the best. Like, you can follow the pizza, there's the pizza tracker, and you can listen to music, right? It sets expectation of like how good something can be. So now that people are being exposed to, Chat GPT and what it can do, they're going to have similar expectations about your applications. So I think you should at least factor that into your roadmaps. Make sure your UX researchers are familiar with these tools and, factoring that into, all of their research.
The other thing we need to be talking more about as technologists is the the idea that we're at a transformational pivot point around this technology. We've probably all seen 3 or 4 of these in our careers. And there's always, hell and brimstone and fear everywhere by people who don't understand it. And for the most part, things transform and they change and we adapt and, we're largely better for it. And I think those conversations, we really need to have those conversations with people to bring them along in the transformation process. Because I just think too often these things happen and then we drive a wedge between people and we don't give people the option to evolve and change with us and to see the value of it. We sensationalize it too much. We highlight the fear of things too much from the media perspective. And I just think, we as the technologists who use this technology all the time, we are actually the voice of reason for a lot of this. And I think, we need to be less silent and more vocal about the positives.
Well, all of that was brilliant. I'm so glad I asked that last question. Thank you all so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts and brilliance. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure was
Thank
all
you.
ours.
Thank you
so
for having us. Appreciate it.